Hello and welcome or welcome back to Language, Culture, and Dr. Lou. And today I have a little Columbus a Day edition for you, or maybe anti-Columbus Day edition for you, because I've noticed that Columbus Day is pretty much being written off the calendar these days, and he used to be such a big hero to so many of us. And and so I'd like to take a little dive into why why Christopher Columbus is a lot less idealized and a lot less glorified than he used to be. And it all comes down to people looking into the history of what he did and what was going on at the time. And that brings me to Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. That's a day we're also celebrating here in the US as of today, Columbus Day. And so now that we're sorted out that it's Columbus Day edition, what I wanted to do was sort of debunk a couple of myths that we all take as just general truths about Christopher Columbus. First of all, we all know that Christopher Columbus proved that the world was round. Uh, and also, we know that Christopher Columbus discovered America. And on top of that, we also know that Christopher Columbus must have been a successful and respected leader. And to those three things, I say wrong, wrong, and wrong. And so let's get into why. So, first myth I wanted to kind of debunk is that Columbus proved that the world was round. And some of us did learn that as little kids in history, because his ship could go farther than you can see on the horizon. And so therefore the earth must not be flat but round. But the thing is, people knew that the world was a sphere, that the earth was round, since ancient Greece, pretty much. Yeah, the Greeks in ancient times, they already knew by uh, the shape and the phases of the moon, as well as the shadow cast on it during a partial lunar eclipse, that the earth had to be a sphere. That's how it would cast that kind of shadow. Anyway, and so that's going way back to ancient times. And even and elsewhere outside of Greece, and let's talk about most of Europe at that time, by the Middle Ages even, which would be before Columbus time, um, they already educated Europeans knew that that the earth is round and not flat. So that had been debunked for a long time now. And so Christopher Columbus was not really proving that the earth was round to anybody. And the only thing he really did prove is that he underestimated the circumference of the earth. Um, because he thought that he could sail west from Europe, and by sailing west would get him directly to China. And of course, that was incorrect as well. There's a much bigger space between Europe and China, and of course, the Americas are in that space. And so we know for sure that um, Christopher Columbus did not prove the earth was round, and just that he underestimated how wide around it goes, the circumference of it. And the second part of that, like I said, the Americas are in the space in between that he tried to sail right through. And so that brings us to the second myth that Columbus discovered America. And I do remember learning this in elementary school in history class. And we, as folks from the US, when we hear America, we think United States of America, right? And so one reason I would say that Christopher Columbus didn't discover America in that sense is that he never, in any of his travels, he never set foot on mainland North America. Like, not even, he never got even as far north as Florida, for instance. And so that's one thing. Nowhere on mainland North America, although he did get to the shore of South America and along the shores of Central America, but he never even made it along the shore as far north as Mexico, much less United States or Canada or anything like that. And of course, this was in 1492. We know his first trip was. Um, so in the 1490s. So on top of he never made it to mainland North America, it was a big consensus in the academic community that Columbus had discovered America until, somebody asked the Vikings what they were up to about 500 years earlier. And they're all like, oh, yeah, we were discovering this America-shaped continent. And so, like I said, 500 years, nearly 500 years before Christopher Columbus's 1492 trip, you had Vikings coming from Scandinavia first over to Iceland, and then from Iceland, Eric the Red brought them as far as Greenland and all that, and then um, eventually in the year 1000, Leif Erikson got all the way to Canada. And so we're talking Newfoundland, which is, of course, one of the maritime provinces of Canada, and they set up a settlement there in 1021. So we're talking hundreds and hundreds of years before Christopher Columbus ever sailed the ocean from Spain to the Caribbean. Like, as we saw in the previous map, I'll go back to it for a second. All of his travels were going between Spain, which is the image well right below me, and into the Caribbean, and not really doing so much as far as the continents go in the Americas. But back to the Vikings. So Leif Erikson actually headed up this settlement in L'Anse-aux-Meadows, which is in Newfoundland, Canada, which at the time they called Vinland. Um, but anyway, so that debunks the fact that Christopher Columbus proved the Earth was round, and now the fact that Christopher Columbus discovered America, that was the Vikings. And as somebody who has a little bit of Viking blood in him, I'm happy to say that. And so, of course, I can understand why nobody would want to give the Vikings credit for discovering North America, because honestly, they terrorized Europe for centuries. So that's understandable. But anyway, the last point I wanted to debunk was that Christopher Columbus is seen as someone who must have been a successful and respected leader. And that, I think, is, yeah, really off. And mainly we can point to his treatment of the indigenous people on the island of Hispaniola, which is the island that today contains the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And we think he must have been a respected leader because he was actually governor of Hispaniola in, well, for the greater part of the 1490s anyway. But this, he was not really so respected and successful as a leader, in part because of how he treated the indigenous people, where at first he's in his writings, it's all, oh, they're peaceful and all this. and then he's pointing to them as ignorant, and because their spears were made of cane, whereas he showed them his sword, and they cut themselves on it out of ignorance and all that, and he found they would be easily subjugated and made to do what the Europeans wanted, aka he was talking about turning the indigenous folks into slaves. And so that's really bad. And there was a lot of, well, other stuff going on while he was governor there, but that's a big one I want to point to. And on top of it, he wasn't that successful. Like I said, he enslaved a lot of the indigenous folks from Hispaniola. And when he tried to bring them back to Spain, so a lot of slaves coming back to Spain, as well as bringing back gold, and messages of the abundance of gold in the New World. Both of those were a big failure because a lot of the slaves died in the ship on the way back, so they were not there anymore to sell or anything. And gold turned out not to be so bountiful uh, in the Caribbean where he had planned to have them. And then on top of that, I mean, speaking of slavery and the bad treatment of the indigenous people, it is even worse. This image here actually portrays how some of those people, I mean, as we can see, dogs feeding on them, they were used as dog food. They were fed to the hounds. Anyway, so that terrible, terrible stuff to indigenous people. And on top of that, his little settlement wasn't as successful as they were hoping he would be. And so, with a lot of the distrust of others towards him at the time, he was eventually in, I think, 1500, chained up and then sent back to Spain to be tried over all the atrocities going on under him and all the failures. And so I think that there is no way that we can consider Christopher Columbus to have been a successful and respected leader, because his leadership got him put in chains and tried for it. If you're worried about whether he went to jail or not, no, he didn't go to prison. He was stripped of his title as governor of Hispaniola, so that was taken away. But at trial, after the trial, not Franz, the King of Spain, King Ferdinand, different Ferdinand entirely, um, he pardoned him. He pardoned Christopher Columbus and actually uh, funded him a lot more, gave him a lot more money to return to the New World for a fourth journey and everything. And so I hope this might help explain why I'm thinking that Christopher Columbus is not so very deserving of a Columbus Day. But anyway, that's just my opinion. But thank you very much for watching this video with me. And please do give it a thumbs up. And yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to you in another video. And if you want to make sure that happens, please do make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. I would appreciate that very much. And yeah, so until next time, catch you around next time. Bye-bye.